Hey, welcome to Agri Talk. It is March 2017.
Yes, it is.
Right.
It's springtime. Right?
Today or yesterday?
Yesterday?
It's the equinox.
One of them
anyway,
things, yeah.
it's changing.
Yeah.
And so it's now no longer winter and we shall not get any more snow. Or freezing
Right.
temperatures, right?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And we haven't had a winter yet, I don't think.
I'm fine.
Yeah.
That's okay with me.
I'll agree with that, but you know, it has snowed on Easter, so who knows?
Right.
Who knows what we have?
So today we're talking beef.
Beef. It's great.
Yeah.
Now today we've got John Grimes. He is an OSU beef specialist. John, you'll have to correct me on all of your titles and everything because I know you cover one end of the beef to the other on anywhere from marketing to raising to growing to you name it. So
You're an educator?
Officially, I'm an educator within the system. My title is beef coordinator,
Beef
and that's
What are you coordinating?
education with producers out in the state.
And then you also have a practice where you do have a farm and
Yeah,
beef
we
and
do.
cattle and all
My
that.
family does raise beef cattle, so we kind of practice what we preach, so to
Right.
speak. I think some people, maybe sometimes it gives the ag educators more credibility if a farmer knows that they're making mistakes on their own farm.
yeah.
So we try to practice what we preach. So yeah, it's been an extension. It'll be 31 years this week.
Wow,
And,
31 years.
A little less hair than I had when I started, but been a county extension agent several years, and then moved into this position January 1 of 2011. So.
Well, I know we only got like 20 minutes to talk, but what has the beef industry changed? How has it changed to now? What do you see?
It's no different than a lot of agriculture. It's gotten a lot more technical and scientific. Just the changes and scientific advancements since I started in extension has been pretty dramatic, and a lot of the technology that we use in everyday society applies to agriculture. You know, whether it's GPS systems or DNA testing or pharmaceuticals, things like that, they all seem to have, at some degree, at some time, an agriculture application. And the beef industry has used some of those same technologies. For example, in our beef operation, we use ultrasound. You know, you go to a doctor's office and a family's trying to decide if they're pregnant or not. We use the same machinery on livestock, and just different, maybe a different wand or reader, but same machine. We can do DNA testing to determine parentage, quality of the genetics.
Wow.
So a newborn calf, I can go pull a blood sample and maybe save some time that we've used in the past to determine how good an animal is. So I mean, that's just a couple examples of, not to make it sound like it's totally Star Wars, but it is definitely it's a business, and most full-time farmers and part-time farmers too want to treat it that way.
So you're trying to determine if that maybe that new calf is one that you want to keep for maybe breeding purposes down the road, or is it one that goes, well, that one goes to the stockyard or something to that effect, or into the feedlot?
It may go directly for beef production, or it may go for reproduction. And that can be a big economic decision. You know, the old school way, she'd have to have 2 or 3 calves
before you realized,
before we had any indication how good of a breeding animal they'd be. So if they do not appear based on DNA that they're going to be as good as some other ones, we can put them to their best use.
Wow. So what does that entail? Say instead of breeding, you're going to send this one to the feedlot because you think it'll make a great steak. How? I mean, is there something, you know, that?
And that's part of what we use the DNA for, to see what their carcass quality is. Marbling is you buy a steak, that's the flecks of fat in the muscle, and that's what adds flavor and juiciness to the steak. And generally you get rewarded for that, the higher degree, and not to get too in-depth in it, but you go to the grocery store, go to a restaurant, there's 3 primary grades that you're going to see on a package or on a menu. prime, which is the highest degree of marbling. That's more for your white tablecloth restaurants, or
And that's not including Kobe beef, is it?
well, that Kobe or Wagyu beef generally fits into that grade. They're a breed, Japanese breed of cattle that is very high marbling, maybe the highest in the world.
Right.
And so,
But they have a posh life. That's
Yeah, I think so.
But there are farmers that are bringing those genetics and crossing them with ours to up the game, so to speak. So, prime is higher price. I mean, like I said, that's a steak you're going to pay a fair amount of money for at a restaurant, and then choice, which is good, it's very good, not quite the degree of marbling, and then select, which is less marbling yet. But those would be the three most common grades. And then you've got some branded programs like Certified Angus Beef, which is the longest established branded beef program in the country. That has to be average, choice, or higher. So choice has 3 degrees, low, medium, and high. So to be certified Angus beef has average, choice to higher, which includes prime. And one thing we've learned about food consumption is consumers are willing to pay for something they know something about or is perceived of higher quality. And that doesn't go just with meat, that goes with fruits, vegetables. So you'll see all kinds of brands, all natural, hormone-free, grass-fed, humanely raised. I mean, there's all kinds of label connotations that can be attached to a product, and I think that's something that's changed a lot since I started. I would say generally food production was commodity. They really weren't brands. They were, okay, green beans or corn or whatever. I mean, when you hear Coke or Pepsi, that's a brand, but it's still soda pop,
Right.
so to speak.
Yeah.
But I raise Angus cattle along with Simmental, but I always like to see the Angus name out there as a brand. I mean, that's a perceived quality name.
Right.
Is there one
higher
better for
quality.
you?
Depends on what you like. There's been lots of research that shows that people are saying, well, I want less fat. But that's one thing producers have done is when you go to the store, you don't see as much fat on the outside of the steak or animal. And you can buy hamburger different degrees of leanness, 90-10, 80-20, whatever. So depends on what your dietary needs are. I would say, and I'm speaking somewhat from a fact-based opinion, but also bias, is this country is used to grain-fed beef, and it's a certain flavor. And I think we like that. Now, grass-fed beef is important. It's a growing thing, and so it's perceived to be leaner than grain-fed beef. There's trade-offs. Grain-fed beef, we usually harvest those animals 15 to 18 months of age. That's when they're usually ready for market. Grass-fed beef is a longer-term proposition. They don't gain weight as fast. They're slower growing, minimum of 2 years. So, okay, we have one scenario where we use grain, another scenario where we use grass. And under the grain scenario, they still consume forages. They don't eat grain from the time they're born. Okay, it's usually at the end of their life cycle. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm not denouncing grass-fed beef production. It's just a choice of production systems. One, you use grain. The other one usually requires more land because it takes more acreage of grass. So there's trade-offs. And I guess the thing
I wasn't sure how you would notice it in the end product.
probably on a label. It would probably be indicated grass-fed
But
beef.
if somebody gave you one and the other one, you probably couldn't tell much difference.
You would tell a flavor difference.
Yeah.
The grain-fed beef, grass-fed beef, forages have a lot of carotene in it, so the fat generally will be a little more yellow because of the carotene.
Okay.
So the grain-fed beef would typically have a little whiter looking fat, and it just does have a different flavor to it. I'm not saying one's better than the other. It depends on your preference. I would say that most people in this country though are used to grain-fed beef. So that's a big change in production, and we've had a lot of swings in prices this decade. I can't remember the last time we visited, but prices in 2014 and 15 were very high. We're talking basic economics here, supply and demand. In 2014, the nation's cow herd was the smallest it had been in over 60 years, and the main reason that was drought out west.
Okay.
States like Texas and Oklahoma.
Have we recovered?
Yes, we have. Most of the country is out of drought now. But you take a state like Ohio, I think we were the 30th ranked beef cattle state. We have 288,000 cows based on ag statistics. A state like Texas or Oklahoma, many, many more cows. So when a drought happens there, it impacts
It's a much larger
nation
impact.
supply and
Yeah.
demand. Roughly in this country, there's roughly 31 million beef cows. And so in 2014, that number got down to 29 million. So just since 2014, we've added 2 million cows to the cycle. So we have more supply, prices come down. So that's been an interesting cyclical thing. Probably the largest production areas that were still in drought a year ago were California and the Southeast. The kind of the breadbasket, the Great Plains, had recovered. And so Texas and Oklahoma and Kansas and those kind of states have been building back up. We don't see it so much around here. Our numbers stay relatively constant.
Yeah.
So that's something that's happened quite a bit. So farmers have experienced, not just livestock farmers, but grain farmers have all experienced some pretty significant swings in prices this past decade. And it can make it a challenge as far as planning. You know, if you're in any kind of business and you don't, you know, if I was smart enough to know what the prices would be 2 or 3 years from now, I'd probably be on Wall Street or something like that.
Yeah.
But we make educated decisions based on the information we have. And the one thing about cattle, it's a long production cycle. You know, it's 283 days gestation period, and like I said, before an animal's ready to be harvested for beef, typically at the minimum, it's 15 to 18 months. So from the day they're conceived till the day they're consumed, it could be 2 years or more. So it's a long-term process, whereas a meat supply like poultry or pork has a much shorter generation interval, so they can make big swings in production a lot quicker than beef producers can. So that's, you know, I guess I hear agriculture attacked a lot of times in the press, and I would contend that beef production is a very good use of some ground that's not suitable for grain production. You think about where you see beef cattle in Ohio, you kind of draw a line from Cincinnati up to Columbus, over to Wheeling, West Virginia, you know, south and east.
Right, our hilly country down here.
Right, yeah.
And I joke about it, but you think about Ohio, Ohio's kind of where the Corn Belt stops and Appalachia begins.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of, the county where I live, Highland County, Route 50 is kind of a line of demarcation, and the north side of the county is flat, and you'll see the big tractors and combines doing corn and soybeans. And I live in the southern part of the county, and you know, you don't see near as much corn and soybean production. So I think we're making good use of the land. There's always concerns by the public. How do we use our natural resources? And I do think farmers, you know, there are exceptions, but I don't know too many farmers that want to stay in business that are going to be irresponsible with Mother Nature's gifts, you know, whether it's forage or water or the soil, how we use it. We got to protect it to stay in business. So,
And understand that there's been some fires out west?
yeah, and some of these things can't be avoided. You know, just in the last couple of weeks, in fact, about right at 2.5 weeks ago, Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, and Colorado all experienced pretty significant damage from range fires. And, you know, I guess to me, some of this is act of God type stuff. You know, it wasn't anybody's particular fault, but there were significant losses. I know I think there were 7 people perished in different ways trying to save animals or save property, which if anybody's had any experience with fire, that's not to be taken lightly or played with.
Right.
But very familiar with some of the folks in Kansas that experienced losses. And when you get a lot of fuel or dormant grass on the plains, and then you get fire fueled by 60 to 70 mile an hour winds, it's not a recipe for good things to happen. And there's been some, I guess it's frustrating to me, there's been some coverage in the media about it, but to me, not nearly the amount that it deserves. They'd rather talk about fighting in Washington, D.C. or...
Yeah, I haven't seen much at all about it.
No,
they've kept it pretty quiet.
And
I
it's
think.
frustrating. Now, in the scheme of things, is it going to make it much difference to you at the store in prices? There's been significant animal and resource loss, but In the big picture, no, probably not. But I guarantee there's families. I know a family in Kansas that has a big ranch, 47,000 acres. They lost all their fence.
Yeah.
They're going to have to build 270 miles of fence.
Now, is that covered by insurance?
I can't answer that.
I know it's a lot of work. It's not
well,
like it just,
Yeah.
there may be, I don't know if that falls under property owner's insurance. I know probably to some degree, but I guarantee they didn't have full coverage for 270 miles worth.
Right.
Is
yeah.
what I would
And
spend.
that act of God thing.
And then I don't know what the government's going to do, if they're going to step in and help those folks. But I will say, if anybody is interested in supporting those folks, if you go to the Ohio Cattlemen's website, ohiocattle.org, there's a link or a page that says Cattlemen Helping Cattlemen. You can go and find the links where you can make donations to those folks. People lost their homes, lost all their cows, lost their resources. They need help. You know, I think all of us are conscious of government spending, but I think whether it's a Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans or
Yeah.
blizzards or, like we said before, act of God type events, those folks need help. I mean, they
Right.
need some assistance.
Yeah.
And if there's any way you can help, I know a lot of ranchers have sent hay and feed to those folks, and that's a big help.
Yeah.
This problem's not going to go away for a while.
No.
So I just want to put that plug in that that folks are in need of some help, and they, like I said, it's covered in 4 states. And that website I mentioned, the Cattlemen's website, you can see what efforts are in different states.
Yeah.
So just check that out. I think it's important. I think that's one thing you'll find about agriculture. Farmers will help farmers in need,
Yeah.
and I know not a large percentage of the population is directly involved, but I don't know if too many people don't have some connection to agriculture through family members or friends or whatever. So keep that in mind. I mentioned the Cattlemen's website. Through my work with Extension, we do have what we call a beef team website,
Yeah.
a group of educators that folks can go find lots of different information on beef cattle production. You can go to u.osu.edu/beef team, and there's several pages there, but we put out a weekly newsletter with lots of information. In fact, last week we talked about this fire damage event. We have a library with lots of fact sheets and different types of bulletins. And then we have a YouTube page where we have several videos you can go and watch. And I know you've helped me with some of those over the years.
Yep.
I can't remember the exact number, but I know Stan Smith, who coordinates our beef team webpage, he said that those YouTube videos have had well over 130,000 views. So there's farmers using that information, and that's my job. You asked me before. Before I was more of a generalist. I worked on all ag concerns, and now today I kind of work specifically on beef and forage. Is what I do.
Has consumption gone down? I know there's been certain groups that have, you should eat more like white meat and different things. Has beef production or consumption gone down at all?
It has historically, say over the last 30 or 40 years, but over the last 5 to 10, it's fairly stable.
Okay.
And I will be wrong if I quote figures exactly, but I want to say per capita consumption of beef in this country is somewhere in the 55 to 60 pound range overall. The population.
People still love their hamburgers.
Yeah.
yeah.
And I'll show some of my bias here. People will pay a good steak. It's usually, to me, it's kind of a celebration food. If you have a big event, a graduation, an anniversary, things like that. And you think about our restaurants, what we have choices of. We don't have too many steakhouse equivalents for pork and poultry.
Right.
You'll find a good pork one.
Might be a barbecue place.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about if you want to take your wife out for her anniversary, you're thinking about sometimes a steak place.
Yeah, you typically don't go to a barbecue place.
Right.
I guess that's true.
But
I agree.
I guess what I'm saying is, if you notice, there's kind of
We go out for tofu.
Oh, yeah.
I'm losing respect for him
I was going
already.
to say, I'm going to move on over here.
No, I'm just joking.
I'll stay on the beef side.
But think about when you drive around and look at the restaurants. I mean, we still have the fast food giants. Your
Oh, yeah,
McDonald's
and
Burger
they'll never
Kings.
go away. Yeah.
But we've had this layer of what I would call upscale hamburger places like Five Guys,
Yeah.
Smash Burger, Quaker Steak and Lube,
Yeah.
In
places
and
like
out on
that.
the other side.
And so somebody maybe wants to buy a little better hamburger, they have options for that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I guess that's what I was referring to earlier. I think the consumer is better educated, they have taste preferences. And I will say one of their downfalls on beef, it's not a cheap meat to produce. You can produce chicken and pork cheaper. So if you buy beef, it's generally for taste. You never hear somebody say beef tastes like chicken. You know what I'm
No,
saying?
that's true.
It's
Yeah.
unique in that regard. So I am being a little bit of a cheerleader here today.
Yeah, hey,
but
that's
my
but
job.
that's your job, I guess. Yeah,
And I have
you're-
been, I have been on the beef council where we promote beef to consumers. We have a class, the beef team in the Ohio Cattlemen's put on called Beef 509, where we actually let producers see a live animal, then they get to see it with the hide off and learn about what it takes to produce better beef.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what my job is whether it's through nutrition, genetics, health, and we can talk about health a little bit with antibiotics, things like that.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm saying, it's a complicated process, and there's probably a reason that about 1% of the population is involved in agriculture production. It's hard, it's complicated. So, but I mentioned antibiotics, and as of January 1, there's been a change in the law that farmers have to use feed-grade antibiotics. In other words, if you're putting antibiotics to prevent sickness in animal feed or beef cattle feed, and this is across multiple species,
Yeah.
you have to consult with a vet and get a prescription.
So it's disappeared off the shelves?
You can go into a feed mill and get it if you've ordered it, or they have a standing prescription
Right.
for you.
Okay.
But they're not going to sell it to you over the counter without some type of a veterinary prescription. So why did this happen? And I know most farmers don't like more paperwork and more regulation, but to me it's part of the way we have to change doing business to build confidence with the consumer that we're not abusing our resources and we are responsibly using the products we have available. You mentioned earlier, is there a limit on when we can feed it up until the time it's harvested, or withdrawal times is what the
Right.
industry
So there's no
calls it.
residuals in the
Right.
meat that we're buying.
And before a product is labeled, they have to show the FDA what that time is. So some products it might be a week or 2 weeks. Other products are safe enough, it may only be a day or two. So farmers have to adhere to that. And the concern with antibiotics was we were going to develop resistance. We overuse something. If you have a cold or a flu and you use it and it kills most of the bugs, but some survive, that's how resistance
Right.
builds up. So we are
Evolution.
Yeah.
Mother Nature usually wins, by the way.
Right.
Yeah.
Man doesn't outsmart Mother Nature very often.
Not
but-
very often.
But it's a way to protect what's available to humans. And I guess I'm going to show my bias a little bit here. What happens if your child has the flu or the sniffles? You go to the doctor.
You go to the doctor.
Or urgent care,
Yeah.
and get a prescription. And I would contend that farmers are probably more responsible than the average family. Those drugs do cost, and
Right.
they don't want to. For efficiency reasons, I don't think.
You don't want to keep feeding that to them.
I don't want people to think we're out there just pumping drugs in them all the time. But if there's an animal that's sick or vulnerable to get sick, we want those tools available to us.
Yeah.
Do they separate them from the herd, or do they treat the whole herd?
Depends on the production group.
Yeah.
If like these animals we're feeding for beef production, compared to a mature cows usually don't get regular doses of antibiotics. Just like you and I, over time we build up some
We
resistance
build up our
to
resistance
things.
to it. Yeah.
An animal, I'll tell you, since the first year, a group that we got a prescription for was when we take the calf off the cow and the stress that they're going through, being removed from their mothers, and we put them on feed. That's a prime time for animals to get sick.
Right.
That's when we want to use it. But once they get over that stress time, then we'll take them off of it. So, but we have that tool available to us.
Right.
So that's an example of how we're trying to use technology.
Well, that's
Is there any other things that you give beef cattle?
Well,
Besides
there's
trying to keep them.
what affects us the most are respiratory, like pneumonia, and there's different degrees of respiratory problems that we worry about. And you think about the weather we have, and you were talking about the winter.
Yeah.
35 degrees in rain is the worst, and they get chilled and they get stressed. So we do that. There's different products we use. We're not using steroids to pump up, look like bodybuilders and weightlifters, but there's some vaccines to prevent reproductive diseases. There's different things we use for prevention, and but I wanted to mention the feed grade one because that is a timely one right now.
Cool.
Okay.
Well, Mike, I think we're about out of time.
Yep.
So
So that's all the beef we have for now.
for now,
It's all good news. We don't have a beef.
it's all good. Yeah. We'll definitely need to get John back and talk some more about this. I think it's a great topic for everyone to know about.
Right.
Thanks for the
There's
time.
lots of stuff I don't realize what
Yeah.
goes on behind the scenes.
Yes, absolutely. So I think until next time.
All right. Thanks for watching Agri Talk, and see you next month.